Economy theory. What a boring thing, some might say. Especially right now, when we're going through the boring economic concepts, the basic, the introductory part by standards of IGCSE Cambridge. But, on another perspective, what is demand? Demand is the reason we buy, is the reason we choose. And not only because things are cheaper, but because something else impacted our decision to do so. You see, we will start with a very basic economic terms. But in the end, we'll find out how this world works, which is essential not us if we are planning to do the business, but just to understand what is going on in this world and how to make our decisions. And yes, my name is Alex, you are watching Know the Game, and today we will continue with the lecture 6 in economics, demand. Why buyers buy and what impacts their decisions. So, what is demand from the perspective of economics? Well, in an introductory level, it sounds like that. Demand is both willingness and the ability of consumer to pay a certain price for a good or service. But I will phrase it a bit differently. Demand is willingness and ability to buy for the given price within certain amount of time. We'll get to that why it's so important later. Notice, we just named two very important different things. Willingness, the desire to buy, and the ability, having income and resources to actually complete this transaction. And yes, it is worth outlining that technically, when we speak about demand in introductory economics, we speak about the effective demand. Because, for instance, we also have potential demand where there is maybe, just maybe, willingness to buy. But the ability, it's another story that we need to somehow to check. We might not even have a necessary willingness and we're just assuming it. But that's for marketeers when we are coming up with the very new product that doesn't exist right now on the market. We'll get to that in some other lectures. Now let's move on and review something very important, what comes with the demand. The quantity demanded. It's basically the amount of good and service that people are willing to buy at any given price. It's a very interesting momentum because for the demand, it's like a law of demand. It's an inverse relation between price and quantity demanded. The higher is the price, the lower quantity is demanded. The lower is the price, the higher quantity is demanded. Why does it happen? Well, we have two reasons to outline. First one, when the price falls, it's like our real income effectively rises because technically, for the same money, we can afford more. And the second one, when the price is lower, more people can actually afford the product in the first place. That's the main rule of the demand. Lower the price, more quantities will be sold. Higher the price, less quantities will be sold for the same two reasons we just mentioned. But here's the important thing. This is how demand is affected by the price. But demand is not only affected by the price. We have so-called non-price factors that are affecting the demand. And the first factor we will learn today, tastes, habits, and fashion. This is about the trends. When something is in, demand rises. When it's out of fashion, demand quietly dies. And tastes are not only social, they can be physical too. For instance, food is the best example. Your product might be amazing, but if it doesn't match local taste preferences, good luck with your demand. Second non-price factor is the income. How much people actually earn. People in the United States buy far more goods and services than people, let's say, in Vietnam. Why? Well, simple math. What is $10 when your average salary is, let's say, $3,000 a month? And what is $10 when your average income is $200? Same price tag, completely different reality. As third one comes substitutes and complements. When we speak about substitutes, it's basically alternative option to your product. It could be direct or indirect. For example, for cola, the direct competitor, let's say, would be Pepsi. But it's not the only thing that cola is competing with, because instead of Coke, somebody might buy, well, tea, water, or maybe even juice. Same thing it's dealing with. Thirst, just different solution. Complements, on the other hand, are also as important as this, because what are complements? Basically, the products that complete the solution, like your smartphone. Will you use it without the apps? That's what actually killed Windows Phone, because when Windows Phone arrived, it didn't have as many apps as iPhone or Android phone actually had. So, let's go with the classic example, let's say car and petrol. When fuel is rising in the price, sales of cars will go down, because people don't feel like traveling on car right now is price effective, and vice versa. Petrol prices going down, more or less, people see that, oh, now I can afford myself having a car. So they all, substitutes and complements, move together, just different paths, and we'll come back to it. Next factor will be advertising. Yeah, advertising doesn't exist for decoration. This is the reason why companies pay billions and billions to advertise and trying to convince us that we need their product. And honestly, can't even demand exist for the product that nobody knows of. So it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we experiment much more with the known brands rather than with unknown brands when we choosing this or another product. So indeed, advertising is another non-price factor that driving the demand. Fifth factor would be government. Now here, it's really hard to say that it's not exactly non-price factor, because how government operates with demand? Well, with taxes or subsidies, which means increasing or decreasing the price. But still, at a certain extent, we can say that this is one of the main factors that influencing demand after all, right? Especially when we talk about the local products versus imported, that's how we do it. Also, government regulates the demand for the products it feels more necessary for society or less necessary. And in previous book, we were giving this interesting example about the cigarettes, where government was regulating smoking habits through the higher price of it. Number 6, the state of the economy. This is an interesting one. It's already not just a country is rich or poor, but it's about the cycle of economy. In a perfect example, it will be year 2008. Financial crisis all around the world. Demand obviously collapsed for almost everything. People stopped, well, trusting in tomorrow, so they stopped spending today. Well, in 2008. Also, apart from these 6 major factors, we have such factors like weather. For instance, ice cream, well, sells better during the summer, while not being sold as much in the winter. Or umbrellas. We definitely need them more for the rainy season, right? And interesting one also is demographics. Because in certain countries there are more younger people and there is a higher demand for product X. But in certain countries, more elder people and therefore higher demand for product Y. What I like about the new book of IGCSE Economics by Cambridge, finally, we can say that this is a curve. Well, in the book it was always a curve, but usually in the previous edition of the book, I was showing students this graph and saying, here you go, this is our curve of demand. Through the whole book, that was the curve. And I had to explain to the students, oh guys, well, you know, it's introductory economics, therefore, yeah, this line is actually a curve. Now, they're also showing us that, guys, we're simplifying right now. Yeah, that's how it could look. And indeed, demand is not just like going in one single line or on a single trajectory. Things could be messy. So this is something to outline, and this is a very good change for the new syllabus and the new program of the Cambridge. As I stated in my previous video, this curve is quite self-explanatory, yeah? We have axis of x, which is quantity, axis of y, which is the price. So, as we can see, higher the price, lower the quantity. And lower is the price, higher the quantity it gets. The only thing I definitely need to adjust here, you see, there will be never infinite. Because even if we will give away ice cream for free, it's not like people will eat all the possible ice cream in the world. Yeah, there is always a personal limit of how many ice creams you can eat and you're ready to store. Therefore, there is like no infinite there by default just because the price is free. So important thing out of this you need to outline is a term called market saturation, because demand can't grow forever. Another thing is important for me to explain to you is movements along the demand curve. So we have our demand curve, let's let it be a line for now, and what do we need to outline here? Well, everything is painfully logical. A change of the price basically causes the movement along the curve, and when the price rising, what happens? Correct. In this situation, the quantity falls, and the price falls, the quantity increases. That's it. No magic. Just movement along same curve. There's a one tiny little thing that I need to tell you again that will be required from you to remember when you're dealing with the exam. When we're moving along the curve, demand curve, all the moves left, which basically increase the price, called contraction. And all the movements along the curve, let's say it's kind of right, in this case we call it extension. So we extend the quantities. So it's more about the quantities, not about the price, but the quantities in this case. So increasing quantities, extension, decreasing quantities, contraction. But we don't exactly say that. We speak about the actual movement along the curve, left contraction, right extension. Now let's break the demand into the two parts, market demand and individual demand. So market demand is the sum of all individual decisions about how much people want to buy at each price. But we also have individual demand. Here is not literally one person, but it's better think of the group of buyers or segments. This part is extremely important for business. Because yes, total demand for the product X might be some big number, but who is actually buying it? Who is your main customer? That's the quiet hint about why economics is useful for entrepreneurs and marketeers. You can sell a certain number of units overall, but once you split that total into individual demand by segments, you will understand who your core customer really is and how you might need to adapt your offer. So you can treat the market like a collection of smaller markets, men, women, teenagers, retirees, and so on, and then add them up. Each segment builds its own piece of overall picture. For business, it's not an abstract theory. For example, Netflix analyzes demand by age groups and by countries. Clothing brands do the same thing. They know teenagers and adults buy different things. Now let's move to a really important subtopic that helps you actually feel what demands means, the conditions of demand. First, let's go strictly by the textbook. When we talk about movement along the demand curve, we're talking only about reaction to a price change. That's first thing. But other factors change. Like consumer income, like tastes or expectations from the economy. Then demand shifts. And that's not movement along the curve. Not anymore. What are the main things here? An increase in demand always will shift your demand curve to the right. So let's say we have a car manufacturer, and then the demand for the cars increased, right? So what does it happen with the curve? Well, it shifts to the right, and therefore at any price level there's a higher quantity now required. So for instance, on this graph, when we move to P1, the quantity demanded increased from Q1 to Q3. It's very important to note it from the actual graph, but because you see, P1, the actual price level, stays the same. But because we have a shift to the right, now the quantity moves from Q1 to Q3, higher quantity, which again just confirms to us that with the shift of demand, for the same price, we will have a higher quantities sold. Or, well, yeah, only sold. In this case, sold. Could be given. And obviously, next comes decrease of the demand. And in this case, our demand curve shifts left. Then, at any price, the demand falls. And to support this theory, so-called, we can see that, again, our P1 stays the same. But because the curve shifted left, quantity, in this case Q1, moves to Q2, which is more towards the zero, more left. And therefore, it's obvious that quantity also fell down. So price stayed the same. The quantity changed. And that's the main thing about the demand. So let's make a quick summary. A shift of the demand curve is always a change in the demand caused by non-price factor, while a movement along the curve, it's always a response to a price only. And this is where we need to come back to the non-price factors that we listed earlier that influence demand. So the topic will finally click into you. For instance, habits, fashion and tastes. If a product is popular, demand shifts right. More people are ready to buy it, even for the higher price. Next thing happens obviously the same. The product is no longer trendy, nobody cares about it. You will even put lower price. Still, less people will ready to buy it. Of course, same works with the income. My income increased. Wow, I can buy more. And obviously the demand curve will shift right. Income going down. Next to no income. Well, of course, this will push our demand curve to the left. And here, more for the businesses. Yeah? Okay, so we don't have any competition. Then our demand curve is just like that. Then, out of sudden, a lot of competition arises. And then it pushes our product to the left because people have more choice now, and therefore less and less likelier they're gonna buy our product in the same quantities for the same price. But once our competitors encounter certain difficulties, this will push our curve a little bit back to the right. And same, but a little bit different way, works with the complements, yeah? For example, we are selling cars, and then petrol prices went down. This will push our curve, demand curve for the cars, a little bit to the right. We will have more cars to be sold. But if the fuel prices are going up, or something else related to our cars going higher up, our market will shift to the left. But yeah, complementary goods sometimes even can kill you completely, like I already gave you an example about Windows Phone, because that's what actually killed Windows Phone. They came to the market, they established certain demand curve as they believed, but because there were not sufficient complements, applications, it basically pushed the demand curve so left that Windows had to shut down the whole idea of Windows Phone. The most interesting thing when we're playing with advertising, and obvious, more people are aware about our product, more they are interested, more it shifts our demand curve to right and vice versa. We, for example, don't do enough advertisement, but our competitors do, and this shifts it left. So that's a very interesting momentum, because even if we do advertisement, but our competitors do it much better, we might even be more shifting left than shifting right. Yeah, too early, I think, but a very essential thing to remember for the people who will be also observing entrepreneurship and marketing videos on my channel. Now, one of the reasons why I decided to list everything from the non-price factor, because of the next point, governments. Because you see, this one is tricky, because in case of government, we have no shift here, because what government does, it, let's call, creates movement along the curve, because if it creates tax, oh, it's increasing the price. So our demand curve not shifting. Same with the subsidies. The curve itself is not shifting. It's just basically price and a quantity relationship in this case. What will be shifting is the supply, but we'll come back to this in our next video. The final one, obviously, the state of the economy. Because if everything's alright and people are believing in the future and there's economic boom, we are shifting our demand curve to the right. But if things not working out so well and we're hearing the news that certain crisis is appearing, our demand curve is definitely sliding to the left, because people not feeling safe, people not feel safety of the future, and therefore they spend and ready to buy much less. I thought the new book will change something, but no, it sticks to the basic thing that we had in the previous book either. You see, you will see the big difference how demand being explained in A level comparing to IGCSE. Because if you just compare my way of introducing demand, you'll notice that I introduced the period of time into my description of demand. I think this is very essential already to learn now, at least in my videos, because quite a lot of people will stop their development in economics knowledge in the introductory stage. And I don't blame them, because quite a lot of things are irrelevant for regular folks out there outside of the basic economic course. The time period is essential. And why? Because the amount of coffee we sell in one day sometimes could be irrelevant to our total sales within a month. Things are essential to compare in a time period frame. And IGCSE approach is saying that, well, demand is the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price in Cambridge IGCSE. But A-level, for the people who are actually in business, gives a very important momentum, additional adding over a given period of time. Just for you to know, for the students who are doing a IGCSE exam, obviously period of time is not so relevant. I would have said, if it wouldn't be actually mentioned, once we will speak with you about the supply and price elasticity of demand and supply. And yes, as of now, that's what we should kinda finish as per IGCSE Cambridge. But the problem is, I made the same ending around this momentum here when we were talking about the demand in my Russian channel. Though Cambridge surprised me in supply. It actually introduced the word ceteris paribus, if all other things stay the same. Why it's so important? Well, remember we were talking about the marketing, yeah? And we said, okay, so we will increase in advertisement, and this might shift our demand curve to the right. It might, but might not. At the same time, there's a fashion, there's economy, state, people, personal income. Those factors might re-affect your spending on advertisement. So therefore, that's one of the interesting things that A-level economy straight away explains us. Well, economics are not a solid science because of ceteris paribus. You see, too many variables. So on its own, our advertisement marketing spending will shift our curve to the right. But there are other factors to consider. And this is an important thing to outline, since my channel is not only about introductory economics, it's also about entrepreneurship and marketing. Therefore, yeah, I will cover a little bit out there and a little bit now, just to outline that these facts, yeah, we already listed on its own, they do shift demand curve or left or right. But the world is not standing just around these two things and just like, okay, yeah. There are other things going on. There are competitors, government regulations, and a lot of other fun stuff. So, with this, we outline the demand. Next video, we will outline the supply. And supply is not only about business. Don't forget, when you're applying for a job, from economics point of view, you are also supply. And therefore, knowing what actually affects the supply is essential for you in your life as well. But for today, that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. Every like, every comment will be highly appreciated. And the main thing, subscribe to this channel not to miss my next video. Thank you for your attention. Danke schön. Liels jums paldies. Shakala Hazaidzian.